Most of us associate cranberries as a wonderful natural way to deal with bladder and urethra problems, especially when inflammation occurs. But few people know that it is incredibly effective for issues such as heart disease, high blood pressure, stomach problems, or liver problems. That's why today I'm going to tell you why it's worth using cranberries and how to do it properly. These small red sour berries belong to the group of the most valuable berries with health-promoting properties, and in general, we harvest them from September to November. However, because they are quite durable berries, we can still buy them in the supermarket in December. If someone doesn't have their own garden or doesn't have them at home, you can also find these fresh berries for sale in January. Even until mid-January, I think we can still easily find them available. Why fresh? Because they will contain the most active substances. But of course, you can make various preserves, you can dry them, you can freeze them when it comes to their health benefits. Well, first of all, obviously, it's the urinary system. Cranberries are famous for and have been most thoroughly studied for their ability to prevent bacteria, especially Escherichia coli, from sticking to the mucous membranes in the urinary tract. If the bacteria don't stick, then they can't build up colonies and multiply. That's why illnesses go away much faster. And cranberry absolutely has to be one of the elements of our treatment during inflammations. However, it's also worth knowing that the approach should always be holistic. It's also worth doing anti-inflammatory sitz baths with herbs. It's good to use probiotics, but Dr. Moro's soup will also work. I talked about Moro's soup in another recording. Back then, I mentioned how brilliantly it works on bacteria in the digestive system. Because just like cranberries, it prevents bacteria from sticking to the mucosa, and that's why they don't multiply. And the immune system handles the infection perfectly. And if in that first video I was talking about the digestive system, then let me tell you, it's exactly the same. Moro soup will also work for urinary tract infections, so it's worth using it then as well. And for the same reason, because cranberries prevent bacteria from sticking to the wall, they're effective in diseases related to excess Helicobacter pylori. That's why if someone has been found to have an excess of Helicobacter pylori in their stomach, for example, because generally it's known that this is part of our gut microflora, but if it starts to multiply and is present in larger amounts, it can cause serious inflammation and even ulcers. And by using cranberries as a preventive measure, you can help prevent the formation of ulcers in the stomach. Overall, when talking about the amazing effects of this berry, it owes them to the huge amount of various polyphenols, those active compounds that have an incredible impact on our body. In addition to their antibacterial effects and supporting the urinary system, they also have antioxidant properties, generally protect our cells, have anti-inflammatory and cardioprotective effects, support the heart, and overall boost the body's immunity. And speaking of heart protection, it's worth knowing that the flavonoids found in cranberries have a very positive effect on the walls of blood vessels, making them more resilient. They also lower systolic blood pressure very well and additionally have a positive effect on the ratio of cholesterol, low-density lipoprotein, and high-density lipoprotein. That's why, as a preventive measure, it's believed that people who are prone to high blood pressure or have a weakened heart muscle, it's worth including cranberries somewhere in your diet. It doesn't necessarily have to be a staple product, but I'll tell you how to use it and some cool ways to add it in the kitchen from time to time. It's worth it because we actually have quite a lot of these health-promoting products, but sometimes we forget about them and there aren't enough of them in our diet. It's also good to know that cranberries support detoxification processes and have a very positive effect on the liver, including limiting the accumulation of fat cells in liver cells. That's why cranberries are considered a wonderful way to prevent fatty liver disease. And now, when it comes to using it, of course, raw cranberries are best because they contain a lot of polyphenols. And it can be used as an addition to meat, for example, to duck, turkey, or beef. It's also a wonderful addition to cheeses, various types of salads or marinades. And to make sure it doesn't lose its health benefits, we don't heat it up, we just need to crush it. You can add a bit of honey or a little orange juice. And for example, if you're making some salad dressings, it will be delicious and healthy. In general, when it comes to combining cranberry and honey, there's also a well-known folk method for various cold symptoms, for inflammation of the throat, and for the bronchi. You simply mash the cranberries gently. They don't have to be mashed very thoroughly. Then you add honey to them and leave it for 3 to 5 days so the flavors can blend together. And then take 1 teaspoon 2-3 times a day. This mixture is consumed in a different way. It's an infusion of cranberry and ginger. Such a mixture will work for urinary tract inflammations, upper respiratory tract infections, as well as bronchitis. That's because cranberry itself has bactericidal properties and will inhibit the growth of bacteria. But ginger will also have a warming effect and will help thin out secretions very well. Mucus, which can appear, for example, in the upper respiratory tract or in the sinuses, will be thinned, which will help remove bacteria from our body even faster. So it's also worth preparing such a mixture for yourself. Such a raw infusion. You can also make cranberry purees, and they can also be included, for example, with cinnamon, ginger, or vanilla. And you can add such purees, for example, to porridge, whether it's oatmeal or millet porridge. Additionally, as a way to diversify your meals, you can use dried cranberries. However, very often, the dried cranberries that are sold in regular supermarkets are heavily sweetened. They're basically just sugar. It's better not to use those. Instead, use ones that are completely unsweetened, or sometimes they're soaked in apple juice and then dried. Then they get a little extra sweetness, but there's no added sugar, so that's a huge plus as well. That's why, of course, it's best if we just dry these kinds of preserves, these berries, at home. If someone has a dehydrator, I'm sure you found that these are the best, most delicious preserves. These dried berries are simply delicious, but let's also remember not to eat them in large amounts, because dried berries do contain a bit more sugar since they no longer have that water. We can also talk about cranberry juice. Cranberry juice is also effective, especially for inflammation. And it's recommended to use about 50 to 100 ml of juice. Dilute it with water and consume it like that once or twice a day. But again, such juice should be homemade if possible, or if you buy it, make sure it doesn't contain sugar or any added sugar. And you see, there are many ways, both in the kitchen and in folk medicine, to use this berry. But it's worth remembering that there are some contraindications and precautions. First of all, people who are taking blood-thinning medications should be careful with the amount of cranberry they use. Just don't overdo it. And also, if someone has a very sensitive stomach, eating cranberries on an empty stomach and in larger amounts can be problematic. It can irritate the stomach lining, cause heartburn, and create a sensation similar to excess stomach acid, like irritation and burning around the stomach area. So, not on an empty stomach, and don't overdo the amount. I hope this information will be useful for you, and I wish you all the best.
Lots and lots of health, and see you in the next recordings. This was Natalia Samaretz with You Health Beauty Phytotherapy.